I am delighted to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Jimbo Clark. Jimbo, I have heard great things about you from a mutual friend, David Pullen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So it's a real pleasure to be here.
I love what you do. And if anyone just hops onto your website, the imagery is so powerful. So I'm really curious to hear about a bit about your story, the pivots and watersheds, really that sit around that phrase of thinking outside the box. Can you share that story?
Sure. Well, it all started with a client request. And I think so much of what we do either starts with a client request or starts with a situation in the room that you weren't expecting. And so you came in with a plan and then you had to do something else. So I had a client ask me, can you do a training on out of the box thinking? We have silos and we want them to think outside of those silos. And it just so happened that at the hotel that they were running that, a friend of mine had just done a big team building event and had huge amounts of cardboard sitting there. And so I was like, oh, maybe we can get them to make boxes, And so I just thought, yeah, we'll just make boxes, and we'll have in the box thinking and out of the box thinking. And I kind of pulled it together the night before, it's like just one of those little inspirations when I got there and I saw all this cardboard and I was like, and so we co-created a model of if you had a box on your head, what would the different parts of the box be? What would the different panels represent? And the pictures were great. And the process was so much better than I had expected. I thought it was like a warm up, maybe a 45-minute conversation. It went 3 hours. And in all of the post interviews, it was a 3-day program. It was the part that landed the strongest. And the client was like, "Well, this is really great. Could you do boxes for our other parts of our department?" And you start to kind of think, well, maybe there's something here. Mm-hmm. And so then I started just iterating it and doing it for universities, trying to figure it out, and over time, it all gets refined. And now I think together with myself and the facilitators I've trained, over 20,000 people have put boxes or taken boxes off their heads. I mean, you got to put it on to take it off, but yeah.
How did you feel? How did you feel that first time you tried it? You said there was no real process. It was like, I just gathered these materials. I anticipate it's going to be 45 minutes. And now you've just extended it to 3 hours. What was going through your mind as you were delivering that first ever session? Were you thinking, wow, what do I do next? Like, what was going on in your mind?
I was giggling like a little kid. I was thinking, oh my God, this is so cool. They're going to put the boxes on their heads. And I was so mean. I gave them box cutters and cardboard, made them make the box. And then I took like little plastic balls and had them play catch with boxes on their heads. So this represents communication. And so, with the box on your head, how hard, I did all this stuff and they were just miserable. So it wasn't, the first time wasn't the tough one. It was the second and third time.
Interesting.
And what I found happened was I would put it into my proposals and then the clients would see the fixtures and they'd hear the story and there was an instant, hook into, oh, this is cool. But then as we got down to trimming down the proposal to what would fit, I would take it out because I didn't have confidence in the landing of it. I didn't have confidence. And I mean, I knew I could get the boxes on, I knew I could take it off, but then what? And so it was one of those times where, there's gold dust inside, there's a diamond inside, but it's still too rough for a client. And so those were the ones that were scary. When you get a big client that buys into the idea, but I haven't bought into it enough to know what I'm doing. And I would be physically exhausted because I didn't have slides. And I was carrying people through this whole process. And by the time we got with the boxes off and them talking, I'm like in a pool of sweat in the corner, just exhausted because it took so much mental capacity to make it work. That was the tough part, was getting it beyond the conceptual, playful stage into predictable outcomes.
That's hard. It's interesting that you talk about confidence. And I sort of joke, I've got a friend, Jonas Riant over in Finland, and he was talking about the title of this podcast, First Time Facilitator. And he says, we're constantly first time facilitators every time we try something new. And so Jimbo, imagining when you're starting this, you're already working with the client. So I assume you've got a few, bit of experience under your belt before you try it, yet you're still feeling this caution and taking it out of your proposals. Before we sort of go too far into your story, how did you start training and facilitating? Like what drew you to this profession?
Two things happened in about the same time. One was I attended a training called Business in You, which is a kind of a spinoff of Money in You. And I met, a master trainer, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I like what he does. And so I offered to just kind of follow him around the world and hang posters and do the music. And so I basically volunteered to understudy. From his name's David Neenan, lives in Colorado. And I probably helped with maybe 15 different programs across Asia. And so being a part of the back of the room, especially running music, every time when there's a break, he would be back there with the other key players. And so me, as a brand new guy, no idea what I'm doing, he's like, well, what song are you going to play? I was like, I don't know, this song, And so he started kind of teaching me about the spirit in the room and about energy and artifacts, creating meaningful artifacts. He was a real master in accelerated learning and kind of more the training accelerated learning side. And then at about the same time, I met a guy named Larry Philbrook from the Institute of Cultural Affairs, who's kind of the godfather of facilitation in Taiwan. And he's more of that deep spirit of facilitation, we are, and so it's kind of like on the one hand, there's this training, accelerated learning side. And on the other side, there was this kind of deep, the spirit of facilitation, and they kind of left and right brained me into being excited about it. Yeah.
What an amazing experience. I'm sure any first-time facilitator would love to be that sort of understudy traveling around the world. Was it as glamorous as it sounds?
I mean, I was paying my own way, so it was as glamorous as I was willing to pay for, right? So,
yeah.
So when people ask me, how can they improve their skills? My answer is always find someone that you like and volunteer. And I use the phrase hang up posters because back then we had posters. Now it's like, run the mirror, produce. I mean, now in this world, get good at producing. And then you get into the design, you get into what's going on, you hear the client interaction. So if you produce for people that you really think are great trainers and facilitators virtually, you could be sitting in Melbourne and you could be, learning from the best.
Absolutely. That's the coolest thing. And I love just hopping on random webinars and events that other people are running and just taking what works. You mentioned before that there was a mix of the left brain and the right brain, or like that, those different sides of facilitation. Where do you think that you sit on that continuum? Do you do a bit of both? Can you go on either side?
I like to think about what we call the space between. So if you think of a triangle, there's the purpose that you're there. There's the outcomes that you're trying to get to. There's the people that are in the room and the stakeholders. And then there's the place, the space that you're creating, the artifacts and all of that. And then there's that space between. And the space between is the part that's might be engineered, but not created, if that makes sense. You do choose music, you do choose different images, you do. So I would say that I tend to be much more on the experiential side of things to drive practical outcomes. But I also think that if we're not delivering a practical outcome, then we're entertainment. And my life's too short to be an entertainer. I could have made that decision a long time ago. And so I never want to provide the energy that doesn't also provide the impact. And so, yeah. But my approach tends to be a little more relaxed. I tend to be a little more loose with my body language. I tend to be a little more informal with how I deal with the people. And I try to sucker punch them into seriousness, maybe.
That's a great phrase. I've never heard that one before.
Neither have I.
Well done. Hey, and if you are listening to this, I encourage you to watch the YouTube video and see what Jimbo's doing with his body language. It's almost like I'm talking to a Mark Bowden, just really expressive in the way that you're communicating with your hands as well. So I guess.
Sorry, can I interrupt? I hate to do this.
Go for it.
Can I just interrupt? No. I think in virtual, this is like the lost art is trying to pull people into And I've got a great friend of mine. His name's John Chen, lives in Seattle. He just wrote the book, Engaging Virtual Meetings. And he always talks about this, that as a, in this world, we have this whole space. And as you talk, do I lean in? Do I lean back? Do I, and how we set up, I think David talked about standing when he delivers. I use a stool so I can anchor myself, and I've got my feet propped up so I can put my hand on my leg, so I'm comfortable. And so I think, part of this boxed communication is really, and I turned off my video a long time ago, so I don't see me, and it's all about trying to find that way of connecting with you.
You're doing a great job. And I'm sure you're connecting with listeners as well through your voice. I want to get back to that point around practicality. There's a lot of pressure on us as a facilitator to help our participants get the outcomes, but ultimately we can't control what they do with what they've learned and, whether they embed it. And a lot of the time it really is about their mindset and how I was always at the school, like I guess want to get things done quickly. I want the latest hack. And a lot of the time when I try and do things, sometimes I sabotage my own efforts because of my mindset. It's like, it's the common denominator. Is there anything that we can do as facilitators to help instill mindset shifts with our participants?
Well, I think as I'm listening to you, the mindset shifts that you're talking about are yours, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it all starts, right? And I think what do they call it? Imposter syndrome that can be inherent in this business. If you're not working for McKinsey and you didn't have, an MBA and a this and a that and the other things. And I think as we're talking about our stories, we kind of stumbled into this realm and had an affinity and an excitement for it. And all of a sudden, you're doing a program for, the C-suite of a multinational, or you're helping create a strategic plan for the next 3 years that is going to be the livelihoods and have a huge impact on all these things. It's easy to kind of have that imposter syndrome. So the mindset I start with every time when I get a little bit, I feel like I'm, kind of hitting above my weight, as it were. I got a couple of things that I say to myself. The first one that I say is, this is like the day of the program. There's no one in the world who's going to do a better job than you today, because nobody else has been invited. You're it. This is it. There's nobody else. Not showing up doesn't help, right? And so just for today, you are the best in the world because you're the only one that's walking in the door with the flip charts and markers, right? And so that's like my first kind of vaccination to my own sense of imposter syndrome, and then the other one is everyone in that room or everyone in that Zoom is hoping that today's meaningful. Everyone is hoping that this is the day that something changes, that this is the day or this is the program where I really get something. And so I walk in and you walk in with everyone's support. And it's like going to a movie. You hope the movie's good, right? The same thing. So I've got everyone on my side at the beginning and nobody else is coming to save me or them. And then the third thing is, this is something my wife says to me whenever I kind of start moaning about things. She goes, well, basically people like you. So I remind myself of that too.
Yeah.
And those are my mindset shifts to help me, arrive in the room. I know it's not quite the question you're asking, but it's kind of the question I'm answering.
Yeah. Well, it has to start with ourselves, as you said. And we are, I think the phrase that I've heard is we are the strongest signal in the room. And so if we are feeling a bit of uneasiness, and again, back to, and I still think I'm a first-time facilitator, absolutely. But I recall back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, walking into a room, and up until the minute of the workshop running, I was like flitting around, updating my PowerPoint, and I just think people were walking in. I didn't even have like the time to sit down and breathe and talk to them. It was all in a mad rush, and I think, what did that convey to my participants? So. Yeah. even in terms of setting that, you spoke about creating that environment and the signals and that space that came out. I wonder how that would work over Zoom. Is it a case of just jumping in early? Sometimes I have a mug of coffee and people just seem to relax a bit more just because they see me holding a mug.
Yeah. I think, these video environments, for me at least, create the opportunity to be a little bit more intentional in my design and my delivery. I use a little bit less of my intuition because I have fewer cues to go on. And, if you say, find a partner and talk, you can watch the talk, you can see the energy, you can kind of tell about when people, once you put them in the breakout rooms, you're just like, okay, I got 3.5 minutes.
I know. What do I do?
Right?
Yeah.
And so it requires a different kind of design. And so I find myself designing my storytelling, designing, I've got my daughter's a graphic artist, so I have her do all of my illustrations. So I try to make sure that there's an illustration for everything I want to say.
Awesome.
Because you got to capture people in a different way. But then I think there's also and I think you're very good at it. I've watched a couple of years. You're very good at just being genuinely interested and being genuinely authentic and just being with the person no matter where you are in the world. And I think people are getting better at that. Participants are getting better at it. Us facilitators are getting better in this Zoomiverse of being authentic and connecting. And so then it's about that. How do I build this connection? Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because well, thank you for your comment, and also saying how much more sort of I've been spending a lot of time. I've been having to recraft a face-to-face session and move it to virtual, and I think I completely underestimated how much time I would spend on that, because everything does need to be deliberate. It's instructional. It's very intentional, as opposed to what I was a bit more looser, like you said, in the in-person environment. You could definitely wing a few things, but in this environment, and sometimes when I hit that stop the breakout room and no one's coming back, I'm like, crap, that could have been 5 minutes longer, but how was I to know? So it's fascinating how this is all playing out and how we're evolving.
Yeah. And I think one of the fundamentals that I and others that I work with use is connection before content. And I think it was really easy a year ago to think, oh my God, I got to put a whole day's program into 2 1.5 hour sessions or whatever, and so I'm just going to get down to the content and let's make sure they get everything. And now I've learned to allow myself to breathe a little bit more and to have a little bit a different kind of pace, and to give them the content in other formats on their own. So you entice them to be curious about the content, and then give them a video with the content, and so that you can have the connection and the connecting and the conversations. So for me, I feel try hard not to feel like I need to deliver X amount of content. I need to create Y amount of connection, both to each other and to the content, because the content lives outside of the Zoom instead of in it.
Yes. Okay. No, the reason I'm kind of grinning at this is last week I was running a leadership session, and I've got a Zoom producer, and he's wonderful. And I was giving him opportunities to run like little mini icebreakers and activities through it. But then we were getting so close to time, and we had all this content to get through. And so this is my reflection. I'm just sharing it, being authentic on the show. I just said, I messaged him and go, we can't do that activity. Let's get straight into this. And then afterwards, I'm like, you know what? We should have done that activity. We were just smashing them with information. I don't think they remember any of it, but they would have remembered that experience, that conversation, something fun we would have done. And so I'm back to the drawing board for the next module, which is exciting. But it's why I kind of go, when people do live sessions and they don't interact at all, that really sort of, it kind of triggers me. So reason for the show.
Yeah. Well, as a participant, like when I don't know about you, but you say you jump into a lot of different kinds of programs, as a participant, I get bored so quickly. And so I think, everyone does at some level. And so it's being empathetic to to the learners or to the participant is huge. It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. Hey, Jimbo, so we were just talking prior to hitting record that we're just kind of joking, like how lucky are we that we get to make money from home, doing what we love, doing what we're passionate about, connecting people. You've built up your business. How did you do that? I mean, how did you start building your brand, and what was it like for you? What advice would you have for aspiring solopreneurs?
By the way, I love the word solopreneur because that's exactly, I mean, I hope my wife doesn't watch this because we kind of are in this business together. So honey, if you're watching this, I'm not really a solopreneur. We're a dualpreneur.
Love
it. So I started my business in 2016 and I thought I was going to be about, games, activities, simulations, accelerated learning. And I built it all around the process of what I do, But then I remember sitting there one night thinking, there's not a single senior leader who's laying in bed saying, boy, if only we had a really good simulation, that would solve everything. And they're not looking, people in general are not looking for the means, they're looking for the results. And so that's when I started shifting from the means of doing things to the outcomes. And so I started focusing on creativity and innovation in the decision-making process. How do we create more innovative teams? How do we create the environment for real innovation, not just in product, but in how we do things? And I found that as soon as I shifted that story, everyone I talk to, oh man, you must be busy. Oh yeah, our company needs that, right? And so I think that's a big part of brand building, is figuring out what is the value to the end user as opposed to what's unique about you or your process or accelerated learning, or nobody cares. Nobody cares unless they're a trainer wanting to learn some new thing, but the end user doesn't care. And then the second thing, I live in Taipei, and Taipei has a very, very small market. I can speak Chinese, and about maybe 20 or 30% of what I do, or what I used to do in a year was in Chinese. But 80%, 90% of my work came from Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, Beijing, Shenzhen, US, others, right? So I found I had to create some value added that was bigger than my ability to be in the room. And so I started creating chunks, of which the box is a chunk. And I created activities, I created simulations, I created, different ways of doing things that were unique to me. Because then my colleagues in Hong Kong, my colleagues in Shanghai could say, well, you've got this problem, we could do this, or I know a guy. I got a guy, he lives in Taiwan, but he's got this great simulation game that's really great for this. We can fly him in, it's going to cost a little bit more, but you're going to get the creator.
Yeah.
And so for about 6 years, I got flown around Asia to do the things that I had created, as opposed to just deliver some result, because there's someone local that can deliver a result. But if you can deliver a result in a unique way, right? And then I didn't realize it at the time, but I was building IP.
So I just wrote down IP, but that in big letters. Yeah, that's what you were doing.
Yeah, and so all I thought I was doing was creating the rationale to pay my airfare, my hotels, and to charge enough so that my friend in Shanghai or wherever can take 34 of the, can get their share for bringing me in. So that means I was definitely charging more than I would normally charge a client. But then all of a sudden I find out I'm worth it, because you're charging $6,000 a day for me. Ooh, it's like suddenly you start to realize, and the client's happy paying that for me. It's that whole, but it's because I had something more than experience and facilitation skills and that part. And it was having that special value added content, in my case, of which you can either create or you can buy into, and the much easier way is to buy into it, right? And so you get a training or you buy a certification, and now, we need someone for, was it MBTI or whatever? Okay, oh yeah, sure, we get Myers-Briggs. Oh yeah, okay, he's got that, and then I got job. So that was that. I know this is a long piece, but just because there's one other piece of this brand building, is listening to what people really buy. And so there's the things that people think are interesting, and there's the things that clients, oh, that sounds really, oh, I like this, or oh yeah, let's do this, simulation and simulation games. People ask for that a lot, but in the end, people bought the box for me. And so I had all of these things, but the thing that people kept buying was the box. And so then I realized, actually, to be honest with you, I had two things I liked better, I enjoyed more, but I'm not in business to get my own money. So
that's right. That's right.
Right. And so you've got to follow. It's like for me, I think there's the gift I want to give, there's the need that I see, and there's what the client is willing to pay for. And pay can be in providing time, resources. If you're internal, they're still paying for people to be there. And so about 3 years ago, my wife and I decided, there's so much energy around the box. Let's just go all in. And so we did. And that was a huge shift in my business thinking, my use of time. Would I say yes? Would I say no to? All of that shifted.
Oh, there's so much to unpack here. Let's Jimbo, high five for your response to that. It's taken me a while. There we go. Feel like we're in one of those TikTok videos where you got captions flying over the screen. But it's first of all, that whole thing about when you ask your friends for feedback on an idea and everyone's like, that's a great idea, but you're not actually going, the follow-up question should be, well, give me $50 for it, right? Because that's the true determinant of whether someone actually pays for it. But also the results thing, and this is where I've been stuck. Probably I've found the light now, but it's for the first 2 years I was marketing as a facilitator, and this is all this is a mode of delivery, and this is how great it is. But no one, like you said, no one cares about that. And if you talk to fellow facilitators, we all get it because we're in that bubble, but people outside of what we do don't get it. So focusing on the result is absolutely number one thing. But also then you added to that was the IP that differentiated you. So it wasn't a case of Jimbo competing with Dave or Sally. It was we need Jimbo Clark. That's who we need. So in terms of what I find that when you are delivering, it can get busy and it requires a lot of energy. How are you getting the time and space to deliver, to create your own IP? Were you doing it because for the next workshop, or did you carve out that time?
It's called living without, being comfortable with no cash flow. And I think every geographic and every niche has a different reality. Living in Taiwan, basically, and seeing Hong Kong and the rest of Southeast Asia as my main client, basically from December through a week or two after Chinese New Year, there's not much going on, right? And then as a commitment to my family, every July and August, I would take my kids back to America for 2 months where I just didn't work. So basically, I had 4 months a year, maybe 5, where I'm not really working. I'm not doing much client-facing work. And so I've got to fit a year's worth of income into March to June and August to November. And so the great news is I'm not meeting clients because I've got my partners who are meeting clients in their areas. And so I'm just thinking, what could I do? What's another way of doing this? And then in Taiwan, I would use Taiwan as beta testing. I'd volunteer at universities, and I would do, I called them English camps. But I would just do whatever I wanted to do with the 20 or 30 students that showed up. Okay, today for English, we're going to stick boxes on your heads. Right?
Love that.
Because you gotta get your shtick down, right? It's like being, like if you're a stand-up comedian, it looks easy because they've done it 100 times, right? And so I was put in a physical location where I didn't have to maintain clients as much, and where I wasn't doing as much face-to-face work, and where the cost of living is much less than other places, so I could kind of live through the fallow times. That's what worked for me. Is I would start getting desperate, and I think, God, I haven't made money in 3 weeks. Oh God, I gotta think of something. And I'd get out my notebook and I'd start, getting all weird.
Getting all weird. I really like that. I heard a quote, what you were saying reminded me of a quote the other day I heard on a podcast, and it was, sometimes with a scarcity mindset, you think that having some business is better than having no business, but it depends. Yeah. If that some business is draining your energy and not giving you the creative fuel, then
saying no is the best thing you can do to become a better facilitator.
No.
Yeah. And it's yeah. And I know that a lot of our listeners today are in-house facilitators and they work in the business. But I think coming up for me, at least, I do have a minimum that I don't go below.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't say I happily say no, but I will say no. I say, this is just the lowest that I charge. And they say, but we don't have the budget. Then I said, well, then find another, here, let me help you find another vendor. And I think it's key for us to understand what our value is and to treasure that value. Because if we don't treasure it, other won't. And I would say that of the times that I've said no, at least 50% of those companies have come back a year or two later and say, hey, we've got the budget now. We put you in the year this year. We put you in the budget this year because we want to make sure that we got this. And so making sure that you're not chasing work, and then by chasing work, not having that time to come up with new ideas, not having that time, I think is really key. So like this year, I'm upgrading my box to work virtually in a different way. And so I just gave myself February, March, and part of April where I just didn't say yes. And so I told my wife, hold on, there's no cash flow for a few months here. And in general, I just went crazy on upgrading. But you got to do that if you want to have the capacity later, right? So and so we just, you eat a little more instant noodles,
I feel like this is a coaching conversation. Like, you're telling me all the things that I kind of telling myself, like, say no and create the space. But now it's like to then hear it from someone external that's,
or at least charge
really
if it's something that if it's something that's not really connected to what you're working on, right? There's the capacity, but then there's the alignment. And so someone asked me to do something that's not really aligned. Like I was asked recently to deliver something in Taiwan because I'm physically here, but it's delivering some corporate training that's other people's stuff. That's not my gig. I don't do well at decoding a PowerPoint deck and delivering it. So I just told him, I just doubled my minimum.
Did you get it?
If you want it, no, of course not.
No, but I had that thing happen. I doubled my minimum.
I'm happy to not get it. But if they had said yes, then I would have said, okay, yeah, I'll do this. I mean, yeah, for this, yeah, sure. I'll sell my soul for that.
No, I had that happen to me. Or I think I tripled it, and they said yes, and I was like, crap! Now I need to do an outstanding job on something I didn't even want to do in the first place. But I mean, yeah, you get paid for it, but then you think, that constant thing between time, energy, money,
right?
Yeah, that's
and love,
another Venn diagram. Yeah,
love's the other part, because like I haven't told this to many clients, but I see my role is to fall in love with the participants. And to fall in love with the organization, regardless of what they do.
Yeah.
And so once I say yes, even if it's that kind of reluctant yes, then I say, okay, well, now it's time to fall in love. And that helps me get over the sidetrack. Yeah, because it is. It's kind of like I'm on this path, like, oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. I'll get back. And then it always turns out well. I mean, I'm sure the same thing.
Of course.
It always turns out well.
Yeah. It's interesting you spoke about loving the participants. No one's ever brought that up. But I always feel like particularly if you run like an extended, 2 or 3 day session, at the end of it, you do fall in love with the participants and everyone just feels like, oh, but it's so sad this is over. And you know, that environment, it's gone, but something that you treasure. Yeah, I've definitely felt that. Like, I'm going to miss this group altogether. And they, that was that moment, that really special moment. So Jimbo, is there anything else that you'd like to share with listeners? You shared a lot of advice for first-time facilitators. Anything that you've got so much that you can offer us.
Well, I guess there's one analogy that I share a lot when I'm working with people that are at the beginning of their journey, especially from the business side. So I love listening to people's business models. I love working out with people how to build a business out of this. And I use the analogy of being a facilitator, being a trainer, being a change agent, a professional change agent. There's an analogy between that and the music industry. And so the idea is that there are a lot of people who can sing, and they sing in their, in the cracks of their life, maybe in KTVs or karaoke's or whatever. And people say, "Oh my God, you're such a good singer," And then they'll say, "Could you sing at my wedding?" Or, whatever. And so, "Could you sing in the church?" or whatever. And so you go from just being a person who can sing to a person who's asked to sing. I think that happens for facilitation and trainers too. There are people who are just naturally built for it in an organization who maybe offer to get involved with training, offer to get involved with this, and they start kind of playing around with it, or they just manage their team from a facilitative standpoint. And there comes that transition period between being good at it and finding chances to do it, and then like starting a band, and getting gigs. And so the first thing that you'll do as a musician quite often is you'll be a cover band, or you're going to sing other people's songs, but you're going to sing it and hopefully get paid for it. And maybe it's a side gig, right? You're just trying to get enough experience. I think for a lot of facilitators, that's the beginning, right? They start doing a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there, but they're still delivering 7 Habits. They're still delivering, other people's stuff, but they're able to deliver it in their way. And then they start putting in their own little things, just like a singer. "Oh, this is a song that we wrote ourselves. Hope you like it," and whatnot. And there comes a point in time where you've got to make a decision: Are we like a local bar band? Are we a regional band? Or are we going to be a recording artist? Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's that point. And for some people, they don't go to become that recording artist level. They go to be a studio musician, or they become a producer, or they become a roadie, or. And so there's that point in time where you really got to decide, is this my vocation as opposed to just my invocation? If it's my invocation, there's a lot of ways I can do this and stay inside the corporate bubble, stay inside, having, the security and these kinds of things. And that's a wonderful, beautiful life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if it ends up being that this is going to become your vocation and you're going to become that solopreneur, then you have to have that business model. Then you have to have a plan. And then there's that magical moment for some of us where we go from being that to trying to say, okay, can I become an internationally recognized recording artist? Can I play at this next level, right? And we talked about how that happens. In our pre-conversation, and at each one of these stages, you've got to make some trade-offs in your business model, in your lifestyle, in what you say yes and no to. And I think the hardest thing for people is to say no to the things that they enjoyed presently and in the past to create the capacity for the future they want to live.
That is me right now.
Yeah. Tell me more. Can you tell me more?
Well, I think I love the analogy. It's perfect. It's such an amazing one. When I was thinking about leaving my job, I thought all I want to do is if I can just earn the same amount of income I was working internally, and I don't care what I'm delivering. At least I have the flexibility, and I'm not stuck to being in a bureaucratic organization. And so then I got that. That happened all in the first 6 months, and I'm like, okay, this is great. And then like you, I was like playing around, I'm riffing on things. And then when I'm delivering someone else's content, I feel like I'm kind of dying inside. So that was unexpected. And so it's like, okay, so it's that transition point. But then you're still being called back for things because that's what you're known as. So then it's a whole new journey of how do you then reposition yourself and, write your own songs. Yeah. It's exciting. Yeah. But the hard part that you said before about saying no is critical to that. Yeah. And
I think there's at least in my own life, every time I've gone through one of those, it's almost like a crisis of integrity, but that's probably a little bit of a strong way of putting it. Get to one of these life choices. 2 things have happened. One is that there is a trade-off. There's a letting go of something beautiful. And then the other thing is my wife will, because I don't know, should I keep doing this, but maybe this. And she goes, well, whatever you decide, I'm fine with. My only request is that when we're old, that you never say you sacrificed your dream for security or for the family. Amazing. So, and then it's like, this happened like 4 times. And each time I'm like, okay, I'll follow my dream. You know, it's like I'm kind of hoping that she'll like say, oh no, just keep doing what you're doing now. Life is pretty good, you know. But she's always just been the one, no, you gotta take the chance that you can take, if you want to take it. And so I think trading up, you know, it's like moving house. You know, you want to trade up. And one last thing, because I know I kind of blah blah a bit, but yeah, I'm 55 years old, 56 years old now. And so everything I've been doing in the last 2 years is trying to set me up for 70. Wow. Because I think we all know those facilitators who are in their 60s and 70s, who are giving back and who are caring for, and who may do some client facing work, but really, and so, I mean, I want to have, I'm building a business that 65 and 70-year-old Jimbo can thrive in. But to do that, it means that I've got to make some choices that maybe 56-year-old Jimbo would say, well, I can still get on the airplane. I can still do this. Yeah, but if you do that, if you're saying yes to this, are you going to get that later?
Oh, it's constant trade-offs. And I love that you're thinking so long-term as well. This has just been amazing. One thing, another quote that came to me is you said that just saying yes to the work that is good, but not great, which might relate to people that work internally, is the quote is, a resume is just a list of things that you don't want to do anymore. I was like, well, that's so good. I think Julie, I can't remember her last name, Julie from Chanel said that. Fantastic. Jimbo, it's been an absolute delight chatting to you today. Like, you are just a wealth of knowledge, both from facilitation, plus, you know, music, entertainment, Asia, the business side of it. We could talk for hours. You could be on like so many different podcasts sharing your expertise. If our listeners would love to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
Well, if you want to send me an email, it's jimbo@innogreat, INNOGREAT, like innovate to greatness.com. LinkedIn, there's really only one Jimbo Clark. So you probably find me there. And you mentioned the website, whatisyourbox.com, if you just want to kind of get a concept of that. And yeah, I'd love to hear your listener stories, and especially, you know, around mindset change for ourselves and mindset change for others. Because I think that's kind of what I'm so interested in now is, you know, how do we help people make the shifts in thinking and being that allow them to get more of what they really want in life with a little less pressure and sadness. And that comes down to handling trade-offs from a healthy perspective, I guess.
Could be the title of your next book. You've got a book, right?
I do have a book. It's called Thinking In and Out of the Box. And love, if there's a way I can send a coupon through your channel so people can get that at 50% off. So
thank you. Thanks. We'll share that link to that gift in the show notes for this one. Thanks for offering that to listeners. Jimbo, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. I look forward to our next time.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, David, for putting us in touch. Thanks.
Yep.